What's up guys, Agent here again with another build video, and today we're going to be going over the 1-bar Magicka Sorcerer. So this particular build is kind of my take on the classic 1-bar pet Sorcerer, which has been very widely popularized by, I believe it's Zynode, had first really kind of popularized this sort of build. This build is really geared for those people who either don't have the lag issues, who might have lag issues, might not be able to bar swap at all, as well as people who just kind of want to have a very simple set and rotation to just start with, in order to kind of get started with something like Maelstrom Arena, or just getting started with DPS overall. Now, while this build is capable of pulling pretty nice DPS overall, especially when you consider you only have access to your 1 bar, clearly using both bars is the ideal way if you want to deal the most amount of DPS. So this is more of a holdover sort of build for you to use while you are, practicing your full 2-bar rotation. So you should not rely on this to kind of carry you through things like vet trials. It is perfectly fine for things like vet dungeons, again, vet Maelstrom Arena. But for 12-man content, I would probably say you do want to actually practice using both bars in order to kind of maximize your overall DPS. So the DPS you can pull with this particular build, again, is pretty nice overall when you consider you're only using 1 bar. But of course, using both bars is going to give you the most DPS out of pretty much any build in the game. But this is a very good holdover for those of you guys who do have lag issues, who do need to kind of put in a little bit more work in practicing your DPS before you go out and do vet trials. So before we get started into this build, I just want to mention here that I did take a couple of liberties here in terms of creating this build for you guys. So the first kind of limitation that I put on myself was I could only use base game sets, or sets I can get if I only had access to the base game. So this pretty much limited me to only crafted sets, base game sets that I can farm, so dungeons and crafted sets, as well as overland sets, but it also allowed me to use sets that I could possibly purchase off of Guild Trader. So PvP sets were on the table, as well as crafted sets from the DLC areas and the overland sets from those DLC areas as well, because those can be traded on Guild Traders. So you could still access those even if you only have access to the base game. So, of course, with the base game, that also means that we don't have access to Trials gear, and we don't have access to jewelry crafting. So I made sure to change all of my jewelry traits back to the base game traits for whatever jewelry that I'm running. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the build itself. So there are a few potential sets that you could run on this build, and I'll try to go over all of them that I think would give you the most amount of DPS overall. So, in terms of gear, so Grothdarr, you are going to be able to use a monster helm running Grothdarr. So Grothdarr comes from Vet Vaults of Madness. So this is a base game dungeon that is actually fairly easy to complete. The only tricky boss is really going to be that last boss, the Mad Architect. But even then, once you know the mechanics themselves, as long as you have a good tank, a good healer, and your DPS, your group combined DPS is somewhere around 20k, you should be able to clear Vaults of Madness fairly easily. So Grothdarr, even though you do need to complete vet dungeons in order to grab this, even if you're only pulling maybe 10k DPS or so, you should be able to clear Vaults of Madness. Again, it's a pretty simple dungeon overall. Mechanics are not very challenging at all, and there are really no hard DPS checks. So I highly recommend picking up Grothdarr here. This is going to be the best monster helm set for you to use. It does have the limitation that you have to be within 8 meters. So if you have to play at range, for example, then Grothdarr is not going to be nearly as strong. In that instance, it might be better to pair Grothdarr with a second one-piece monster set, so you can get any of the monster helm set shoulders, I should say. So I would probably go with something like Slimecraw if you can. Slimecraw comes from, I believe that is another very easy dungeon, Vet Wader Sewers 1. Again, probably even easier than Vaults of Madness, so you could get a set of Slimecraw here. Show you guys what it does. So Slimecraw basically gives you Minor Berserk at all times, so this basically means you don't really have to rely on your healer to give you Comet Prayer anymore. So pretty strong set to use. This can be used both in melee and range, so Slimecraw is definitely a very nice set to pick up as well for your 1-bar Sorc. Now, because we're going with 1 bar, we just have 2 sets to worry about. So we have Netch's Touch. This is a light armor set that you can get from Darkshade Cavern, so you do need to farm this from the dungeons, but you can run it on normal because you can just run the armor pieces here. This is a light armor set, so you could also feasibly run jewelry as well because it does come in arcane, so you can really go either way. Now, if you do want to use the jewelry, I would recommend trying to run Darkshade Caverns on Vet. Again, very similar to where Sewers one. It's a very easy dungeon to complete, but you do need to run it on Vet if you do want to get those purple jewelry, which are going to be better than blue jewelry overall. But if you don't want to run jewelry, then you can just run normal Darkshade Caverns 1, and you can just farm up the armor itself and then just upgrade the armor. So this gives us additional spell damage to our shock damage ability. So this is basically going to be a heavy attack build just with 1 bar. And then for our second set, if you can afford it, you can run Spell Strategist. Now, Spell Strategist is going to be very expensive, especially for your new players that might not have the amount of gold necessary to basically buy Spell Strategist jewelry as well as a lightning staff. So if you can't afford Spell Strategist, you do have a couple of other options that I'm going to go over here really fast. So the first option is going to be Necropotence. This is another light armor set that you can farm or you can buy off of guild traders. You can get this from I'm blanking, Rivenspire, so you can just go ahead and farm it, or again you can just buy it off of guild traders. So this is another light armor set, so you can run this as your jewelry, or you can run it on your armor, whichever one is easier. Now, because you don't have to necessarily farm it in dungeons, you can also just buy the purple jewelry, which is going to be cheaper than buying Spell Strategist. So you can run Necropotence instead of Spell Strategist. This is a pretty nice build to run here. You could also run Julianos. I'm going to have to pull up a craft store in order to show you Julianos. Julianos here is a crafted set that you do need to have access to the Wrathstone DLC in order to craft it yourself. But if you can't craft it yourself, like I'm assuming here, you can usually find somebody in a trade guild that'll be able to craft it for you for a small fee. Or you can just buy the set off of guild traders as well. Another crafted set that you might want to consider running is going to be Mechanical Acuity. You will need to have access to Clockwork City DLC in order to craft this set. But again, like Julianos, you can get somebody to craft it for you, or you can buy the pieces off of guild traders. So those are probably going to be your two best sets in terms of crafted sets you can run here. You can also feasibly run Torag's Pact. It's not that strong of an overall DPS set, but it is a base game crafted set, and it's a very easy set to craft. You only need to know 3 traits in order to craft it, and it does give you some spell damage, and it does increase the strength of your enchant. So it is potentially something you might want to consider running, but the other sets that I mentioned earlier will outperform Torag's Pact because the 2 and the 3 and the 4 piece armor bonuses don't really help you too much in terms of DPS. It does give you some survivability, so if you're having issues staying alive, then Torag's Pact is definitely like that happy medium between DPS and survivability. But if you don't have that issue, then you can run Julianos, Mechanical Acuity, Necropotence, Spell Strategist. Those are the sets that you would want to run instead. One final set that I'm going to mention here, let me just find it really quickly, is going to be Mother's Sorrow. This is another light armor set that base game from Discharge, so you can farm it yourself, you can buy it off of guild traders, and because it's light armor, you can run jewelry or body pieces because they do come in arcane, those jewelry sets there. And there is also a lightning staff quest reward that you can get too, so you don't necessarily need to go out and buy a lightning staff if you want to run Mother's Sorrow. You can just do the quest instead. So the quest, I don't know if I'll be able to show it to you guys here on the map, but there is an Argonian, oh yes I can. There's an Argonian village right over here called Silent Mire, and there's a quest associated with it. If you complete this quest, you will get an infused lightning staff of Mother's Sorrow. So you don't necessarily need to go ahead and buy it. You can just run that quest instead, and you can just get your weapon right there. So then you only have to get jewelry or 3 armor pieces instead there. It's a pretty nice and easy set to obtain their Mother's Sorrow. So those are kind of your different set options there, and I do have them all listed down in the description below for you guys to kind of take a look at your own leisure. Now, in terms of traits and enchants, if you can try to get all the vines, it's not really necessary to get all the vines, but it is going to give you the best boost in DPS, and that does also include on your Monster Helm set as well. We are going with all max Magicka enchants because we are running blue food, so that does give us additional health. Plus, because we are using a pet, we do get some additional health through the Sorc passives. Now you will notice that I have a heavy helm and a medium shoulder. We are still going with 511, so if you can, try to get your monster helm 1 piece in medium and 1 piece in heavy if you can. Not a big deal if you can. If you have to run light, that's not a big deal at all. You have plenty of health already between blue food as well as your pet, so don't feel like you need to get a 511. You can run something like 6-1 or even all light if you want. In terms of jewelry, obviously since we don't have jewelry crafting, you're going to have to stick with all arcane. But for enchants, you should stick with 3 spell damage enchants. Now we are going with the heavy attack build, so don't necessarily need to worry about regen. So we don't need to run any sort of regen glyphs. We're going to be heavy attacking the whole time, so no need to worry about that at all. Then we are running a lightning staff on the front bar. There's a heavy attack build, so we do want to run a lightning staff here. You're going to want to go with Infused with a shock damage enchant. You can also go Precise, but with the amount of DPS you're going to be pulling, Infused is typically going to be stronger than Precise here. Then, of course, you don't care about the back bar. So you can see I have a bow here, but we're not going to be using a back bar at all, so that's why it's there. Now, for our character sheet here, high elves are going to give you the best DPS in terms of Magicka DPS. So even if you do want to graduate, so to speak, into using 2 bars, high elves is still going to give you the best amount of DPS. They don't get any of those sort of additional sustain bonuses due to the changes in Wrathstone, but they get 2,000 max Magicka and 258 additional spell damage. Other racial options are going to include the Dark Elves, which get 1875 max Magicka and 258 spell damage. You can also run the Bretons, which get 2000 max Magicka, and they also get 7% cost reduction to Magicka abilities and 100 Magicka regen. So eventually, if you do want to use a full light attack rotation with using 2 bars on a Magsork, basically your kind of typical Magsork builds, then the Breton will give you a little bit of additional sustain there. Probably the best sustain out of all different classes, or races, I should say. And then there is the Khajiits. So Khajiits are kind of fit that hybrid style build where they get 825 Magicka health and stamina, 85 Magicka regen and stamina regen, 100 health regen, and they get 10% additional crit damage. So it's going to be a little bit weaker than the 258 spell damage that high elves and dark elves get, but it still gives you a little bit of additional DPS there. For attributes, we're putting all of our points into Magicka here. Again, we're using blue food, so we don't need to worry about really touching any points in the health here at all. And then for our Mundus, we're going with the Thief. We don't really have that great crit chance if we're running this particular setup. If you're running Mother Sorry, you can run the Shadow instead. The Shadow and the Thief are pretty much neck and neck at low crits. The Thief is going to be a little bit stronger, so that's why we're running it here, but you could also run the Shadow as well, and you'll only do it just a little bit less. Then I already mentioned that we are going with blue food to max health and max Magicka. Now you will notice I am a werewolf. You do not need to be a werewolf. In fact, werewolves are actually not recommended for Magicka DPS because you don't get any sort of bonuses from it. But I was testing out werewolf builds. The werewolf build was using a Stamsork, so that's why I'm a werewolf here. You should be a vampire if you want to be a vampire. That will give you 10% additional Magicka regen, which is going to help you out eventually when you want to go into a more meta 2-bar Sork build. Now for our skills, we only have 1 bar, so pretty straightforward as to what our skills are going to be. We have Liquid Lightning, Blockade of Storms, Daedric Prey, Twilight Matriarch, and then while I have Elemental Drain here, this is just for the parts we're going to do at the end of the video. This is actually where you would put your shield, Hardened Ward, or Empowered Ward instead. So that way you have your shield, you have a heal through Twilight Matriarch. You are losing a little bit of DPS by not using the Tormentor, but it's not that big of a deal. The heal is significantly more important here. Then our ultimate is going to be the Greater Storm Atronach. So this is going to give us really, really strong single target DPS. If you're in a situation where you want more cleave damage, you can swap this out for the Destruction stat ultimate instead, Elemental Rage. So again, don't have a back bar, so we don't necessarily need to worry about the back bar at all. So this is basically just, we have 2 dots. We have Daedric Prey, which we're going to use every 6 seconds. Then we're just going to heavy attack while we have our dots running. Now for our champion points, I'm assuming that you are max CP, so 810 is the maximum CP you can get here, which gives us 270 points across each of our different constellation types. But I will show you 2 other CP setups. I will show you one for 160, so I'm assuming that you just hit the sort of gear cap. And then I'll show you one for 300 as well. So that's going to assume that you kind of hit that sort of additional max stats cap with CP with 300. But if you do have max CP, then you can run 75 Arcanist, 75 in Tenacity, 40 Shadow Ward, 40 Tumbling, and 40 Warlord. Realistically, the other 120 points, so these 40 you can put really wherever you'd like. Blue CPs, 56 Elfborn, 64 Elemental Expert, 26 Spell Erosion, 6 Stab Expert, 52 Master at Arms, and 66 into Thaumaturge. And then our red CPs, I have 81 Ironclad, 61 Thick Skin, and 64 into Hardy and Elemental Defender. Now, if you have 160 CP, then you have far fewer champion points instead of 270 across each of the 3 different lines here. Instead, you will have 52, 52, 53, 53, and 54 instead with, I believe, 53 green, 53 blue, and 54 red CPs. So let me just really quickly clear all of my CPs here. So we're going to move 53 with the green CPs, which is just going to go straight into Arcanist here. So 53 into Arcanist. Pretty straightforward here. You can split it into Tenacity if you'd like, but you're not really going to be able to hit any of the jump points all too well. So you can do like 37 and 53, 16 if you'd like, but you can see here you are kind of overshooting the jump points no matter what. So just stick with 53 into Arcanist if you'd like. For blue CPs, this is going to be a little bit trickier because at this low CP, we're not really going to be able to hit the penetration cap. So ideally, you do want to get that spell precision first to get that additional spell crit. So you would probably want to run 10 spell erosion. And again, we have 53 blue CP here. You're going to want to hit 23 elemental expert. You're going to want to put some points into Thaumaturge here because pretty much all of our damage is going to be coming from damage over time effects. So at this point, you're going to want to put a few more points here. So even 18 is the thing. So we have 18 plus 33. So we still have 2 points left. So you can put those into spell erosion. So 12 spell erosion, 23 elemental expert, and then 18 Thaumaturge. And for red CPs, again, this is going to be really tricky. You have 54 points here. But again, you're not really going to be able to kind of meet any of the neat jump points here. So just do 23, 23. I want to split these evenly. So that gives you 46, which gives you another 8 points, which you can put into Ironclad here. I don't believe you will hit a clean jump point here. Yep, you just missed that jump point there with 8 into Ironclad. This is CP 160. Again, 53 Arcanist, 23 Expert, 12 Spell Erosion, 18 Thaumaturge, 8 Ironclad, and 23 Hardy and Elemental Defender. Now, if you are CP 300, you have 100 CPs to spread across the different constellation types. So in this instance, you can do 49 Arcanist, 49 Tenacity. That'll give you to those jump points, which gives you 2 more points, which you can just put really wherever. So like 1 Tumbler, 1 Shadow Ward, doesn't really matter. You can do 2 Shadow Ward, up to you. For our blue CPs, we're going to do 20 Spell Erosion here. Gonna hit the 10% jump point here, so that's going to be 43. Gonna put a few points into Elfborn here. Gonna hit that jump point 11. This still gives us 26 points, and we're gonna put them into Thaumaturge. So we do end up missing. Actually, no, we do manage to hit the 11% jump point here. So 26 Thaumaturge, 20 Spell Erosion, 43 Ellie Expert, 11 Elfborn. Then our red CPs, very similar to what we did in the green CPs. So we're just gonna split 49, 49. Actually, no, we're gonna do something a little bit different. 37, 37 instead. That gives us 26 more points. So we're going to do 20 Ironclad. The remaining 6 are going to go into Thick Skin. So we just missed that 3% jump point here. So that's with CP 300 instead. So 100 points. Here 37, 37. Hardy Elemental Expert. 6 Thick Skin. 20 Ironclad. So that would be if you're CP 300 here. But we are going to be assuming that we are going to be doing full CP. So a full 810 here. Now, for the rotation itself, again, very, very simple. You're just going to drop your dots, so it's going to be Liquid Lightning, Blockade, Daedric Prey, and then you just heavy attack. You have enough time to do 2 heavy attacks here. And that's basically it for your entire rotation here. So you are still using light attacks here between each ability, but other than that, you just basically do heavy attacks the whole time. And that is basically the whole rotation. You're only using 1 bar, so it's a very, very simple, very brain-dead rotation overall. I want to reset our dummies here. Alright, so now we're going to do a 6-man dummy par so you guys get an idea of the amount of DPS we're able to pull with this build here. Again, we're only using 1 bar, so don't expect super stellar DPS, but I think you guys might be surprised at how much DPS you're able to pull with this particular setup here. Let's go ahead and get started. So I also do want to mention here that I am using spell power potions. So I am using spell power potions. Are they? Here they are. So this gives me a major sorcery and major prophecy. For those of you guys who are wondering where I'm getting those buffs, I am using Essence of Spell Power. Now I do understand that these can be expensive to use, so don't feel like you have to run these if you don't want to. But This is basically going to be the best way to get Major Sorcery and Major Prophecy without giving up bar space, because we only have one bar. We do have very limited bar space here, so just try your best to farm raw materials, sell the materials, and buy up spell power potions. These are going to be very, very helpful to increase your overall DPS while not really giving up any bar space, because we do have very, very limited bar space. So let's go ahead and get started then. Again, very, very simple rotation, and we are going to overcast our dots a little bit here, but that's fine. Just make sure you are light weaving between each ability here. You can queue up Liquid Lightning too while you're doing your second heavy attack. Do bear in mind that you cannot drink potions while you're channeling a heavy attack, so you do need to wait for your heavy attack to finish channeling before you can run any potions. In this instance, I only really have time for one heavy attack, so that does mean that is a result of just running Ellie Drain here. If I didn't have to run Ellie Drain, I would be able to do 2 heavy attacks. And just wait to finish your heavy attack before you drink a potion, because if you try to drink a potion before finishing a heavy attack, it will take you out of that animation. That is going to be a DPS loss. So you can tell here that our DPS is actually, again, I think you guys are going to be surprised at the end result here. You guys can probably keep track of DPS down in the lower left hand corner. You were actually doing pretty decently well, considering that we're only using 1 bar and just using heavy attacks. But this is obviously not going to be quite as good as your full typical meta Sorc. Again, because we did have to use Elite Drain and the Atro, we will have to only do 1 heavy attack rather than 2. Alright, so there we go. That is the 1 bar Pet Sorc build. So, as you can see here, we actually did pretty good DPS if you consider that we're only running 1 bar. We don't have a back bar, we don't have our VMA bar, we're basically just heavy attacking and running basically 3 damaging abilities. And we have our pet, which is obviously also doing damage as well. So, Spell Strategist here doesn't have very good uptime compared to a full light attack build because it does only proc off of light attacks, hence why you might want to consider running something else like Mother's Sorrow or Julianos or Mechanical Acuity instead. Those sets have a little bit easier proc conditions, or they are flat bonuses, so they'll always be active. So Mother's Sorrow, for example, will pull very similar DPS to this, so around 30k or so. But you can see here that Liquid Lightning, Blockade of Storms, and our Twilight, as well as our ultimate Atrio here, Atronach I should say, combined are pulling over 50% of our DPS. Everything else is just kind of just small portions here and there. So overall, This build itself is very simple, very easy, and it can pull okay DPS. Like, this is enough to actually get you through probably the Vet Kraglorn trials. I personally would not really tell your raid lead that you're only running on 1 bar, but this is capable of pulling close to 30k DPS self-buffed. Do keep in mind that we do have very good minor vulnerability uptime because we are using a shock damage enchant. So if your guild, for whatever reasons, does ask what your minor vulnerability uptime is, just it is going to be a little bit higher. 1, you're a Sorc, and 2, you have a lot of sources of shock damage. So that's where minor vulnerability uptime kind of comes into play here. But even then, this is still pretty nice considering that you are only running 1 bar. So definitely wouldn't say this build is a slouch. Definitely pulls very good DPS. It's enough to get you through Maelstrom Arena. It's enough to get you through all the Vet dungeons, as well as potentially even make it through the Vet Kraglorn trials. So that is it for this build video. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.